this was a stunt by the president of the Russian Federation. Nobody took him serious. And of course, Russian forces absolutely did not cease fire, although they had said they would do so unilaterally. So I think that this is a reflection that the Kremlin just has no credibility with anybody outside of Russia. I certainly hope that tanks are coming soon. This was a terrific week for Ukraine and for the West. Announcement by the Czech Republic that they're going to provide a battalion's worth of wheeled 152 millimeter howitzers. France providing the AMX-10, which is a very good armored reconnaissance vehicle. Germany saying that they would provide, I think, 40 Martyrs, which is their infantry fighting vehicle. And then, of course, President Biden saying the U.S. would provide a battalion's worth of Bradley fighting vehicles. So basically, you're looking at everything you need for an armored brigade, which could be the fist, the iron fist for the next phase of the Ukrainian counteroffensive. Before the midterm election, some of them thought that this would be a big issue where they could gain some political traction, and actually they didn't. Of course, the Congress should have oversight. So this nonsense about a blank check, that doesn't mean that people are going to walk away from it. They'll apply proper legislative scrutiny over where it's all going, but actually, this aid to Ukraine is probably getting more scrutiny than any aid that I think I've seen in quite some time. So bottom line is the Congress, in a very strong bipartisan way, will continue to support aid to Ukraine. But the burden is on the president to keep explaining to the American people why this is in America's interest that we do this. It made this very personal, both in terms of the president of Ukraine with the president of the United States, the President Zelensky in front of the Congress. And so it kind of made the relationship seem a little bit more personal, almost like Winston Churchill's visit to Washington back at the beginning of the Second World War. And so I think it was valuable there, and it had to be not well received in the Kremlin to see the president of Ukraine, who they have mocked and dismissed and called terrible names, to see him welcomed like that in Washington and to get the chance to speak in front of the U.S. Congress. I think a huge victory from a psychological standpoint for all of us as well. We know from history that war is a clash of logistics and it's a clash of will. And I think it's very clear that Ukrainian soldiers and Ukrainian people have far superior will for this fight because they are defending their country. I mean, there's no question here who the good guy is and who the bad guy is. And I think Ukrainians, they know that, and they are defending their homeland. They don't have a manpower problem. They've got almost 700,000 people in uniform right now, and another 2 million military-age males and females that can step forward as needed. Whereas on the Russian side, admittedly, it's a little bit difficult to know what the thinking is inside the Russian population inside of Russia because there is no real transparency. We know that about 500,000 Russians left the country back in September rather than get mobilized. So there is no will, in my view. There's no stomach for this fight amongst the people. And you can see in the performance of the soldiers out there. They know they are being sent into a meat grinder where hundreds are getting killed every day. They're untrained, poorly equipped, and there's enough information that kind of comes out over various social media to get a sense of the morale of those units. The population, I can't tell, and it's always puzzled me. I have to be honest, it's always puzzled me how the Russian population is willing to put up with this kind of treatment and these sort of losses. I can't guarantee an outcome, but I think it's useful to keep in mind that this conflict actually has been going on for more than 8 years. I mean, Russia invaded Ukraine back in 2014. They illegally annexed Crimea. They were working in Donbass with the so-called separatists who really are more like proxies. So after over 8 years, Russia, with all the advantages, still has not done more than what we can see on a map every day that shows that crescent of eastern Ukraine that is still under Russian control, and of course Crimea. That's after more than 8 years with all the advantages. So I think that what we're going to see is that Ukraine has achieved irreversible momentum. There's nothing that Russia can do to turn that back. They have no real good options on their horizon, no bright lights out there, except to try and drag this out as long as they can in hopes that the West will lose the will to support Ukraine. And I don't see that happening anytime soon. So with that, and because Ukrainian General Staff has been pounding relentlessly on Russian logistics and on Russian headquarters, and because sanctions are really having an effect on Russia's ability to replenish the precision weapons they have been using against innocent civilian targets, I think that Ukraine will liberate Crimea by the end of August this year. Crimea is the decisive terrain. Without Crimea, Ukraine will never be safe. They'll never be able to rebuild their economy as long as Russia sits there, and they know this. And so I think that's going to be the main effort this year. They'll get that done. And then the other parts that are still Russian occupied, I think that will follow after that. I assume there's always give and take in certain sort of things. I can't imagine that Kyiv would or should accept Russia retaining control of Crimea or any part of Crimea. Now, when you look at that map, if Russia sits on Crimea, they will always have a launching pad into the southern part of Ukraine. So air base, they already have sanctuary there because we haven't provided weapons that allow Ukraine to reach into Crimea and hit those airfields and the Navy base at Sevastopol. Eventually they'll get there, but they don't have them yet. So if Russia retains that, then they'll always be able to do what they're doing right now. And we know from the past 20 or 30 years, that's exactly what they will do. And they can also disrupt anything coming in and out of Odessa. If they retain Crimea, they'll continue to block commercial shipping that would be going up into Azov Sea, where Ukraine's other two biggest ports, Mariupol and Berdyansk, sit. So there's no way to rebuild the Ukrainian economy if Russia sits in Crimea. And also, of course, Russia will claim exclusive economic zone around the Crimean Peninsula, which would prevent Ukraine from exploiting any of the gas that's underneath the Black Sea seabed. So from an economic standpoint, as well as a security standpoint, I don't know why any of us should be pressing Ukraine to accept any sort of settlement where Russia still controls Crimea.